Okay. This is, I think, a good jumping off point to an interesting discussion that blew up on Twitter earlier this week, which is we can't keep up with all the politics, the rhetoric, the vitriol, and this polarization. So Coinbase co-founder and CEO Brian Armstrong wrote a letter saying, hey, listen, if you want to talk about politics, that's fine. Not at my company anymore. We're going to have a no politics rule, no debating this stuff, and we're going to be ultra focused at work. And you can check your politics at the door. When you read this, Sachs, you've come out in support of Brian Armstrong. Mm-hmm. What was your take on his position about leave your politics at the door when you get to work? And
right.
Then
Well, I think what Brian. So I did compliment it. His manifesto, and I think.
Are you an investor?
I am. I'm a small investor in Coinbase, and I'm friendly with Brian, and so I certainly, like the idea of defending him against unfair attacks, but I also genuinely like the manifesto. And I think, his argument kind of boils down to three components. I think number one, that having these debates on every issue, whatever the issue du jour is, pulls the company's focus away from its core mission, which he really emphasized. And, that mission is challenging enough in its own right. Second, he was saying that, and this is something I've said before as well, which is just that politics is just increasingly divisive in our society. It's just inherently divisive, and therefore it's corrosive to team cohesion. And the more you have of that in your company, the worse it is for the team. And I think the third thing he mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, is that the freewheeling debate or discussion of politics, like that we're having here, but we kind of have our own little safe zone here. It risks hurt feelings or misunderstandings that can become HR issues because people can then complain about
they feel unsafe.
They feel unsafe, and they report to. And so that's a further distraction. I felt
unsafe at moments in this podcast. I'll be honest. There was a couple of moments.
Well, I think one of the reasons why this pod sort of works is because we're all friends, and we've created a safe space for us to have these conversations. But the workplace is very different. It's not, what I read Brian trying to do is to reimpose a true safe space by saying, leave your politics at the door. Now, I think he's been deliberately misconstrued by critics who want to say that, well, you have to leave your conscience at the door. That's not true. He's not saying that you can't have your own political views or contribute to causes that you like, but you just got to do it on your own time. Kind of like Mr. Hand said in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, like do that on your own time. And that makes sense to me.
I think I think about this from the point of view of one of the employees working at one of these companies that doesn't want to be a party to the debate. If I'm an engineer at Google or Coinbase, I go into work and I am captive, right? I don't have the option of not showing up to work. If I go to a rally, I have the option of saying, I'm going to go to this rally and walk away because I don't like the speaker, or I'm going to go to the rally because I want to participate in this dialogue or this debate. I can't do that at work. So it's unfair for work, which is a place that I as an employee have to go to every day, to be a forum for people to express themselves on political points that I may or may not agree with, but more importantly, may or may not want to actually be a party to the discussion around. And I think that's the most important thing to note here is it's not about enabling the free speech of the employees that want to debate. It's about the protecting the workspace for the employees that don't want to debate and don't want to be exposed to that. That's really important.
Chamath, as a person of color who, have, I'm sure, has some strong feelings about what we've seen in terms of police shootings, or maybe in your own personal life experience facing racism. Again, as a person of color, what are your thoughts on the workplace? Is it possible for you to leave that at the door? That was the criticism I think I saw from the, people who were supportive of BLM. And they said the background here was they were trying to get Brian to explicitly say Black Lives Matter and to, have the company rally behind that. And that he didn't want to have that be part of the work environment, and that he was offering people 4 to 6 months severance if they would leave if they don't like the new rules. So what are your thoughts?
I think that this whole thing became a quagmire unnecessarily. I think that he showed a lot of naivety and frankly, like, a little bit of stupidity, really. It was really poorly written. And that's why it's been so misunderstood and misconstrued. In my opinion, I think a lot of what he had to say was valid, but when it was so poorly presented and, the essay was like 8 minutes and it was rambling and the mission was like, 97% down on the, it's just like, it was a convoluted fucking mess. So if I had to do it again, if I were him, or if I was his advisor and he had asked me, to proofread the essay, what I would have said is more of the following, which is our mission, which is, I think to create financial liberty or something like that. You guys can find out what it is for the whole world, is unbelievably important. We will talk about every issue through the lens of achieving our mission, and we will be disciplined about saying which things matter and which things don't. So, for example, if somebody says, listen, I really believe in spaying and neutering dogs, the right answer shouldn't be, hey, shut the fuck up. It says, okay, how does that allow us to maximize our users? How does that allow us to achieve our mission? Why does it allow us to achieve our mission? And if you ask the question, why, 4 or 5 times in a very first principles way, you'll get to the answer. So I would have rather said, we are going to train people how to understand what builds up to our mission and what is otherwise something that you should leave at home. And in that context, there are a lot of things actually that are political that need to be brought, especially into a company like Coinbase, which is working in crypto, which is all about eliminating the financial barriers of people that don't have access to it. Like you are trying to dismantle an extremely exclusionary part of the economy. And so there are potentially many movements that matter. And those movements in countries in which you will want to gain users may look like political movements.
Well, and that was Jack Dorsey's point. He
so I just think it was kind of a too superficial. It was very Silicon Valley-esque reaction. It was emotional. It was a little insecure. And it to me, it missed the mark because there was a lot of validity in what he was saying, but presented in a lens of, Silicon Valley bullshit. And it was not well thought through. So if he had rewritten it and he had said 99% of what he said, but through the lens of why we're going to think about a first principles way of defining how everything ladders into the mission, he will train his employees. Instead, what he created was a schism and a decision point. And I'm not sure that that's how you maximize value in 2020 as a CEO, because at the end of the day, you have to deal with an entire population cohort that are in their 20s, early 30s, teenagers that will eventually want to work for you. And whether we like it or not, they're different. And one of the things you need to do if you're going to run an enormous company is understand the psychology of your employees, understand the psychology of how movements and decisions are organized, and then play to win. And it's no different than anybody else. If you want to be in the job, to be the starting point guard for the Warriors, you got to know how to fucking pass the ball. And if you're going to be the power forward, you have to know how to do a certain set of things that are different than that. And so I would sort of have framed it there because I think there was a lot of goodness in what he said, but presented in a pretty shitty manner.
I think it's good he brought up the topic. I do think there's a tactical issue here, and he could have laid out the ground rules for, I think to your point, Chamath, of how we should talk about politics at work and what are the ground rules. I think the number one issue here, which people don't talk about, is that Slack and email and forums inside of companies have created a massive distraction. And when somebody goes into the random channel, which is built into Slack, and I know this is in the weeds, but I have seen this happen at multiple companies now. Slack infects a company. Somebody creates a room about a topic, whether it's Trump or police violence or immigration, whatever it is. And then people want to sound off on that. And now you've got an electronic forum where people are talking about highly charged issues that makes people feel unsafe. And so what I told my companies was, the two companies I run. You could talk about politics. If you want to go for a walk with somebody and have coffee or lunch and you want to have a 2-hour discussion about it, go for it. Please do not put this in electronic form because it's a massive distraction. And there'll be a record that could create downstream human resources issues to your report, Sachs. I
have a suggestion. And this is an organizational design experiment, and maybe somebody listening will implement it at their company. Allow 100% free-form debate about anything. One condition. You literally need to have a soapbox. And like in the 1880s Hyde Park in London, you put the soapbox someplace in a safe space where you can go and you can talk, and people who want to listen will listen, and people who need to work can work, and people who don't want to listen don't have to be forced to listen.
What's the digital version of that you're suggesting?
No, I'm saying a literal room in the campus.
No, a literal place in your office. You put the soap, you have a soapbox, you grab it, you put it on the ground, you stand on it, and you say it. And if you're not willing to do that, then, it's okay.
So are you saying that there's no digital version of that? Because people
I'm saying is that two things. One is the digital version is actually training people to ask why. Why does it matter? Now, the reason why it's important to ask that is because somebody may say, I'll use Jason's example that he loves, we need to support the Uyghurs in China. The best way to do that is to proliferate our software in the following way, because it will free them from enslavement of the Chinese and it will give them access to financial independence. Wow. I mean, okay, that seems to be paying off the mission. So you gotta give freedom for people to come up with these ideas, because the first version of this idea may not actually be what the final version is, and the final version may be the killer feature. So on the digital forum, in the Slacks, it should be why. Respect. That's a very respectful question.
But
why?
David, it should not be in any digital forum because it leads to chaos, because we see that on Twitter. And what's happening is the Twitter derangement that we all suffer from is now infected inside the communication system that runs the operating system of the company. Go ahead, Sachs.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Since you agree with me, go ahead, Sachs.
Yes, I do agree with JK on this one. So look, I mean, Chamath is right that I'm sure Chamath would have written a better letter, but I think we understand the gist of what Brian was trying to say. And actually, I thought it took a lot of courage to write it. And what he's basically saying is that politics has become so divisive in our society that, it'd be nice if we could have these reasonable debates the way that we're having this discussion inside companies. We didn't have to have these artificial restrictions, but we do. We have to, it's the same reason that we have the separation of church and state, is because people couldn't stop killing each other over religious wars. And so finally we had, the Treaty of Westphalia to stop it. And what Brian's basically proposing is a treaty for the workplace, because we cannot get along around politics.
But David, he is the CEO of an $8 billion company. Could he not have hired somebody to edit that essay?
Okay. Well, I mean, look, I just, to me,
no, but I'm serious. Like if it's seriously well thought through, and if it was as important as Westphalia, you would probably have a couple proofreaders.
Corporate version. Okay, it
could have been polished for sure. Here is Jack Dorsey's response, and I'll have you guys respond to it. I think it's in your wheelhouse in terms of what you said, Chamath. Bitcoin, aka crypto, is direct activism against an unverifiable and exclusionary financial system which negatively affects so much of our society. Important to at least acknowledge and connect the related societal issues your customers face daily. This leaves people behind.
I think he's right. You have to view this problem not through the lens of your own emotions, not even through the lens of the frustrations of your employees. You have to help shift the discussion to say, why does this achieve our mission? And just constantly, in a thoughtful, respectful way, ask why. And by the fourth or fifth why, it will either be something that doesn't matter and you can dismiss it quickly, or something that actually is rooted in fact and probably is something you need to pay attention to. And maybe the way that the conversation started was probably not with the right language that people, given the chance, would have framed it differently.
Okay, the worst take, according to the internet's Twitter's ability to ratio people, which is when you get more comments than likes, which is not normally how it works. People are actually taking the time to explain to you how bad your take was, as opposed to liking it, is what a ratio is, if you don't know. Goes to Dick Costello, who's a friend of ours. Me first capitalists who think you can separate society from business are going to be the first people lined up against the wall and shot in the revolution. I'll be. And that's enough to get you ratioed and have this thing go supernova. I mean, Mike Cernovich is retweeting this and losing like his mind over it. That the former CEO of Twitter is inciting violence. He's a comedian as well, DeCostello. So I think he's joking here. But he adds the exclamation point. I'll happily provide video commentary.
Here's my disagreement with Dick and with Jack is ultimately the societal value of a company doesn't come from whatever platitudes or political statements its CEO makes, but rather from the quality of its products and the impact of its products. And in that sense, Dick and Jack are living in a glass house. I mean, Twitter is a sewer of political diatribe and polemical hate. I don't know anyone who feels better, after spending time on Twitter. If Facebook is like cigarettes, I don't know what Twitter is. I mean, it's like fentanyl or something. Yeah. So ultimately, maybe Jack should spend his time figuring out how to make Twitter into a less socially divisive product instead of, because just issuing woke platitudes is not going to do it.
I agree with that. I don't think platitudes does it. All I'm saying is you have to view it through the lens of, I want to become the most relevant company possible and achieve the most impact. And I think that there are a lot of times where some of these issues, when presented politically, underlying it is actually some feature or some capability or some way of seeing the problem that unlocks more demand that can help you win. And not knowing a priori what the answers to those questions are, it's important to train people on a framework versus say you can't talk. Because I guarantee you what will happen is somebody with some killer feature will be too scared to say something because they're not sure how to say it well. And you and I both know, because we've seen many companies that have gone through that cycle, those companies decay and die.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if a policy like this wasn't necessary. I mean, I agree it's suboptimal, but I think it's caused by the fact that people just can't get along around politics anymore.
Yeah. Friedberg, what is your take on ultimately how Coinbase winds up the year or two after this? Do they get more resumes of hyper-talented people who want to embrace a politics, social issue-free workplace? Or do millennials and, Gen Z and this next group of talented folks say, I don't want to work for somebody who doesn't want to talk about these issues at work? And then at the production board where you have a factory where you build companies, do you have some rule around this yourself or thoughts about how you run your companies?
I think the more clearly you define culture, the more successful your company will be. And right or wrong about whether or not you enable the debate and the discussion and how you define the forums for kind of political discussion within your company, the fact that there is a clear definition and delineation around this point, I think removes the uncertainty. And I think he'll do exactly what he's hoping to do, which is to get people to leave and to attract other people that better fit with that cultural model. I want to put my game face on. I want to go to work and I want to win the game I'm here to play. I'm not here to fuck around. I'm not here to do other stuff. I want this job because I believe in this mission and I want this company to succeed in what it's trying to do. And I think other places that allow people to run around and, do things that they may or may not appreciate other people doing, and you have this kind of low definition kind of culture where some people are happy, some people are unhappy. It all kind of, slows things down. And I wouldn't kind of encourage anyone to let that happen. I think it's really important to just define how it is you want to operate, be really clear about the rules and the boundaries, and then
that I agree with as well. I mean, I think it's very much within his right, and I think I do applaud his courage in doing it. I just think that it misses the mark because I think it was too emotional.
I think he can do a 2.0 version and just keep building on the manifesto and say, hey, based on the feedback I got, here's how we're going to do it. No discussion here on the electronic communications.
Reed Hastings put out that fantastic PowerPoint that I think we all know really well, the cultural playbook from Netflix. And when did he put that out? Like
2000.
Almost a decade ago?
No, 2 decades ago. It was 2001.
And he's continued to refine it, right? If you look at, there's recent iterations of it, and they continue to kind of do a better job of defining, how do they intend to operate with people? And I think it's only continue to reinforce the innovation that drives that company into the $100 billion plus valuation it's earned.
Yes, and if there's one important thing, which is that there's a meaningful difference in the average age of a Netflix employee and the average age of a Silicon Valley company. Now, that may be also part of it as well.
I think the one thing that Brian could clarify is that you don't have to check your conscience at the door. We're not saying that you can't have political views. You're allowed to say things on Twitter or take political stands or donate to whoever you want. It's just that the company itself is going to be a demilitarized zone. We're not going to bring these contentious, divisive debates that really aren't related to our core mission inside the company.
Totally
so we can
fair.
all work better. So we can all work better as a team towards the reason that we all joined this company.
But that's totally fair. But all I'm saying again, I'll just say it again. That is such an important thing to say. You could have had it proofread a couple times. You didn't.
It could have come across the way you're saying it.
It didn't have to be written by GPT-3. You know what I mean?
Well, also, I think that it was the dunk he did afterwards where he's like, and by the way, if you don't like it, here's 4 months severance, get the fuck out. That was a pretty aggressive move as well. I don't know how you guys felt. I kind of like the gangster nature of it.
Great. I think
it's great. It's
like
if I'm on the team and I believe in what he just said, I feel great that he's fleshing the shit out. And if I don't agree with it, it's like, fuck yeah, I'll take it. It's really clear.
Right.
And I think the clear-cut definition of culture is what every company needs to kind of pursue. And it's an ongoing pursuit, and you can always do a better job with it.
And culture is what you choose not to do as much as it is what you do. Like, we're not going to talk about politics.
I think Friedberg is totally right. It takes a lot of courage to say, here's what I believe. And if you don't believe in it, then it's okay for you to leave. And here's a severance package. That takes a lot of courage. So I applaud him for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a free country and we all have limited time. We should all go work on the mission that is most important and inspiring to us. And Coinbase has a very specific mission that Brian's defining. He's trying to define it clearly. And if that mission is important and inspiring to you, then go work there. And if it's not, then go work at the place that, where the mission does inspire you. And it may be a startup or it may be, a political organization, whatever it is, go do that thing that's most meaningful to you. That's kind of my interpretation of what he was saying.
All right, as we wrap here,
it was hard for me to interpret because it was so poorly written.
Well, also it was also like a huge bomb on Twitter, and people's reaction to it was based upon, I think, how they feel at this moment in time. And a lot of people feel
this is why I'm sorry, but communications is important. How you say things, what you say, style is really important.
Yeah, so whether it's Biden or Brian. Yeah.
Take the time, get it right.